Do you find it hard to explain to friends and family what you now do? Are you wasting valuable time by attempting to figure out challenges on your own? We have created a community for ex-corporate people running their own business who want to live a life they love whilst giving back to their community. This is the Build, Live, Give show. We bring you first-hand experiences of guests going through many of the struggles you face each and every day. We get real with no corporate BS. And now your host, Paul Higgins.
Welcome to the Build, Live, Give podcast, episode 19. I'm Paul Higgins and I'm your show host. And today we've got a very special guest, Hayden Fricke from PeopleScape. Hayden is a good friend of mine and he's been a mentor through my journey of leaving corporate, running my own business. And he started with a dream to be a tennis star. And he realised that he just couldn't quite get over choking on court. And he also had a family history of some mental health issues. So then he went on to become a sports psychologist to overcome his fear of performance. And he did a wonderful job working with people in sport and also drug and rehabilitation, but he realised that there just wasn't enough money. So he went into corporate HR and had a very successful career. But at some point, his role became redundant and he really had that sliding door moment. What should he do? And his wife, Lynn, actually persuaded him to go and run his own business. And he pursued a business mentor and partner for around 12 months. And he gives you some great tips on how you can get someone like that on your team. And then the rest is history, as they say. He runs a very successful business and Hayden does a great job in articulating that. So what I'll do now is hand you over to Hayden Fricke from PeopleScape. Welcome, Hayden Fricke from PeopleScape to the Build, Live, Give podcast. So Hayden, we're going to get to know a lot about you today, some good and some bad, of course. But what I'd love you to do is just start with your backstory. Tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today.
Great. Thanks, Paul. My story actually just briefly begins back at school. All I wanted to do was be a tennis professional. So when I finished school, I went to college in the US and played the satellite circuit for about 4 years and did really well, except for one thing. I didn't win often enough. And one of the things I realised was that I was able to beat top players in the world when it didn't matter, when in practice, but when it really mattered, I would choke, I would get anxious, and I didn't know how to deal with pressure. So after 4 years of trying to make it on the circuit, I decided that I wanted to become a sports psychologist. That was sort of the lesson I learnt. So I went to uni, became a sports psychologist, and started working as a sports psychologist, and as a young psychologist also did some drug and alcohol counselling and worked with people with mental illness, and realised after about 5 years that there wasn't enough money in sports psychology, and I didn't really want to be a drug and alcohol counsellor for the rest of my life, helping people that are down and out and just helping them survive. I was more interested in positive psychology and how you help get the most out of people. So I decided to go back to university and did a master's degree in organisational psychology, which is all about helping people in the world of work from a positive psychology people perspective. So I got a job as an organisational psychologist with a company called Coin Didsbury in the 1990s. They became a part of a global business called PDI and did a lot of assessment and development work as an organisational psychologist for large companies in Australia and globally. I did that for about 5 years, and then I moved into a role as the head of HR with state trustees, where I went broader than just psychology and used my psychological skills, but also learned all about HR and things that are not related to psychology as much, things like HR policies, procedures, payroll, HR operations, performance management systems and the like. And I did that for about just under 4 years. Then I moved out of HR into a role as a general manager, estate planning. So I ran a team of about 100 people looking after estates and trusts and wills, and moved from there after about 3 years in that role. I left state trustees after just under 6 years, and I went to Spotless, where I was the head of organisational development. So my role there was really looking after the leadership development, talent management for the top 2,000 people, and particularly focusing on the top 70, which included the CEO, executive team, and next level down. So I that was my last role as an employee, and I finished there in 2009 and set up PeopleScape in September 2009. So it's nearly 8 years with the business that I founded called PeopleScape. Now we've got just under 30 staff in Melbourne and Sydney predominantly, and we're very excited to be talking about potentially opening offices in New Zealand and Hong Kong and other parts of Australia. So the last couple of years in particular have been very, very exciting. So I think I'll pause there and finish there, but that's my story of how I guess my journey from sport to sports psychology to counselling psychology to organisational psychology, HR, business, and linking those together to try to run my own business now.
Excellent. And I'm sure there's a lot of, including myself, former and probably current chokers that can certainly resonate with that journey. And it's great that you followed that path. And, other than tennis, and I know you a little outside of work, but what's something that the BLG listeners wouldn't know about you that maybe your friends and family do?
I guess beyond work, there's two things there's probably three things that I'm very passionate about. What top of the list is family. That I've got 3 young children, and balancing out business and family is really, really important. And in fact, it has to go in that order, that family has to be first and business second. So that's really important. I guess secondly, my extended family. So my family is my own children, but also I have, unfortunately, a family with 2 brothers with mental illness. So helping and caring for my brothers and elderly parents is a really important part. So the caring part of me, and I guess most people who know me also know that beyond tennis, I'm very much into health and fitness really broadly as part of your lifestyle. So they're probably important things.
Yeah, great. And I still remember that day when we finished the 7 Peaks. That was certainly a highlight in my career and my cycling career with you. Mm-hmm. And if you sort of go back 8 years ago, I can't believe how fast it's gone.
No.
What were some of the things that may have been holding you back from starting your own business, if you can sort of turn the dial back to 8 years?
I think the first thing is when you're raising a young family and you've got a good income, and the family depends upon you as the major breadwinner, there's the anxiety or the uncertainty of letting go of that paycheck, and the doubt in your mind to say, will I be able to replace that income that I've been getting, that security? Can I let go of that security, and can I back myself to recover that? Maybe not in the first year, but within a 3-year time horizon. So there's that anxiety and uncertainty of having the responsibility of being the major breadwinner for your family. That's probably the biggest thing that I think held me back. The second thing is probably around, is it the right time? I had wanted to run my own business for a long time, but if you start a business too early before you've got the experience and runs on the board, then perhaps you won't be as successful as well. So it's probably for me more about timing of when you start, when you're ready, as well as the dealing with the uncertainty.
Great. And I know when I left corporate, you were there to help me, which was fantastic. Who was there to help you when you first took the step into your own business?
I was lucky enough to have my current business partner, Jason Smith, who owns PeopleScape, with me as a mentor at the time, and he was an advisor and mentor to me, and I had to actually persuade him to come and join with me and be a business partner. He was happy at the time to be a mentor, which was incredibly valuable. So for about the first year, I founded PeopleScape, and he wasn't in the business. He was my mentor. But after 12 months, I was able to convince him to come and join me. And for the last 8 years, he's been a business partner and mentor and friend, which is great.
Yeah, look, and I know I was talking to him last week. He's an exceptional thinker and business operator. How did that convincing go? Like, if you've got any tips for people that are looking to get their mentor on board, what are some tips you'd give based on your success?
I turned 50 last week, and he actually spoke at my 50th birthday party, and I didn't remember it quite like he explained it, but he said I was incredibly dogged and persistent, and he said that he first of all said no to me, which he did. And he thought that he could give me advice from afar, but I think he needed to be in it to be part of it. So I think persistence is key in persuading someone. But the other one is I had to sell a vision. He'd previously had another business that was very successful, but he was jaded by it because of the relationship he had with his previous business partner that didn't go so well. So I needed to first of all give him time to recover from something that zapped him of energy, because you've got to have a lot of energy to go into business with someone, and it's not just for a year or two. It's like a marriage. It's for a long term. So I had to give him time. We had to talk about the fact that our values were aligned. We talked about the long term sort of aims and agreed that we had a real alignment in terms of our aspirations, and even to the point of having discussions about how long did we want the business to go for, and was this a long-term, short-term thing? How would we exit? How would the business end? We talked about that. We talked about our values. We talked about our families and how this would fit with our wives and our families, and we did all of that well before we then said what kind of business would we like to run. And I think it was the fact that we had that kind of big picture discussion about all those things before we worked out the actual business we're going to run. That was what convinced him, as well as my persistence.
Yeah, look, that's fantastic. It's some really great advice for the BLG listeners on their path. And there's always, two sides of the coin. Some people say they'll never go into a partnership, and others that do love it. Like I know you and Jason are such a strong team together. So that's great insight. So now we're going to move into the build section. So you walk into a crowded room, a networking event, something, and someone says, so Hayden, tell me what you do and what does PeopleScape do? How do you answer that?
I have done a lot of work around communication and understanding, sort of answering those kind of questions with our clients. And so we've done it ourselves. And I'm going to leverage from a guy called Simon Sinek, who's written a book called Start With Why that some of your listeners will have heard of or read. And he says when someone starts to talk about what do you do, it's important to start with why and then move to how and move to what. So I'm going to do that. Yes. Our main purpose at PeopleScape is two things. One is to help create great places to work, and secondly, to drive successful business outcomes through people. So that's really why we exist. In terms of how we do that, there's three major things that we try to balance. One is we try to balance out a really evidence-based approach to psychology and human behaviour and how people change their behaviour to the way we work. But that has to be balanced with simple and pragmatic and commercial solutions that are going to fit the client. And thirdly, we build deep, engaging relationships with our clients, because if we can't do that, the other two factors won't matter at all. In terms of actually what we do, I guess at a very high level, it's all about behaviour change. We help individuals and teams and organisations change their behaviours in certain positive ways that are sustainable. The actual services, we've got 4 particular services we provide. One is psychological assessment to help recruit the right people. Secondly, development, coaching, individual and team development work that we do over a period of 12 months and beyond. Thirdly, well-being. We help create a culture that is flourishing. And fourthly, career transition. We help individual senior leaders to transition from one career to another in positive ways. In a nutshell, that's what we do.
Excellent. That's a great structure and summary. And I'll put the link to the YouTube video of Simon. I think that's a brilliant video. And I think certainly for me, I think small business really lives that a lot closer than what I'm finding corporate. Corporate, I think, still a little bit behind. They're still stuck in the what and the how. So with all those services, et cetera, sort of how do you make your revenue currently?
So, I mean, our approach to making revenue is a couple of things. One is we're about long-term relationships, and being able to, I guess, do work with all of our clients almost every quarter. We should be able to do something. And we have a really broad service offering, so there's something we should be able to offer all of our clients on a regular basis. So it's not a once-off. It's about a long-term relationship where we can help them with different needs at different times. Also, our structure is such that we should be able to cope with different economic cycles, up and downturns. So, for example, when things are struggling and people are laying off people, our career transition business should grow. When people are hiring and growing, we should be able to, our psychological assessment for recruitment business should increase. And at various stages, development and wellbeing will sort of come and go. So it's really about the balance of the services we have over time to be able to continue to grow in sustainable ways. Probably the development part of our business has consistently been the biggest part of our business consistently. Probably the psychological assessment is next. The career transition is probably next, and wellbeing is the smallest revenue stream in terms of the way we measure it now, but actually the flavour of wellbeing goes right across every single service that we offer. So it's the breadth and depth of services and ongoing relationships and repeat business with customers that gives us our sustainable revenue streams.
Great. And the ideal client? So who's the ideal client for you?
The ideal client is probably it's more the size of the organisation. It's anywhere between it could be as small as 200 or 300 up to about 2,000. Probably the 1,000 mark is the ideal. We work with organisations that are as small as 20 people, but they're, to be honest, probably smaller than the ideal sort of sized organisation. They are the ones that benefit most from our services, but unfortunately sometimes can't afford us, but they get the biggest return on their investment because we can have a really positive impact on those smaller businesses. The very large organisations like National Australia Bank, for example, we work with clients like that, but they often take 3 or 4 or 5 years of conversations to win that kind of work. So, in fact, that's not ideal. Sometimes they're great sort of A clients you can win, but the ones that work with us repeatedly that really find they need our help consistently is those sort of 500 to 1,000 person sized organisation.
Great. And, you've had enormous growth, which is fantastic. And I've loved watching that from afar of just how far you've gone in the 8 years. What are some of the biggest challenges that you face at the moment in continuing to scale this great business?
In no particular order, probably the first one is finding really good people to be great consultants. So we have a model that says we want about 70% of our consultants to be permanent employees and about 30% to be associates. And finding associates is actually not that hard. A lot of people want to be associates or contractors, but finding people who have the right balance of skill set. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we work in this space, but finding people, psychologists who aren't too full of psychobabble, finding psychologists who can speak in plain, simple language and can build deep, engaging relationships is actually really hard. Usually you can find psychologists that are either good at psychology but not good at the commercial and business, or they're good at the business but not the psychology. So the blend of finding those right people is really one of our biggest challenges. And then from there, it's ensuring that for me, as the business grows, I have to work in the business and on the business. Obviously, a lot of small business owners have heard of that phrase, but it's how do I transition myself from being the expert in psychology to being the expert business owner and gradually letting go of being in the middle of the business towards being working on the business. But it's not a thing that's overnight. You have to do that over a few years, and sort of getting the pace right of being in the business versus on the business is a constant learning for me as we grow. And as I said at the start, we're at the moment looking at, we've got a Sydney business we started nearly 18 months ago that's going great. Now we're looking at New Zealand, then we're looking at Hong Kong. So as we grow geographically, the challenge will be, how do I evolve and change myself to continue to make sure as we go into those different geographic areas that the Melbourne business that I started continues to work well as having an eye on where we're going.
Great, excellent. And I'd certainly, a lot of the BLG listeners could resonate with the in and on, as you said. That's, when you've got all those resources in corporate, you start your own business. And I saw when, there was the three of you and you sort of become jack of all trades, but over time, removing those hats is a struggle. So, look, I completely agree with that challenge, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners would appreciate your approach to that. The next question, and the last one in the build section, is about Lynn, your partner. So if Lynn's listening to this podcast, what would you say to her about the support and the help that she's given you through this journey?
Great question. I think the first thing, actually, it was her motivation and inspiration for me to start. I was thinking about this and talked to her for a while. I had been made redundant from Spotless and had a payout, and we talked about it, and she said, "Hayden, just get on with it, start your own business." So the first thing is, she was instrumental in supporting me and encouraging me to begin and to stop sort of equivocating. So that was fantastic. I think the second thing is just the understanding of the roles that we play to manage the family. I mean, my wife, Lynn, is an occupational therapist. She still works, but she works, in a part-time capacity, and she is the main person that brings up our children, is the home sort of maker, and she, I don't contribute as much as, I would like to at times. So she runs the home and I do what I can. She understands it and she runs it brilliantly, as well as trying to juggle, a part-time job. And she's had to sacrifice her own, I guess, career advancement for our business. And that's been absolutely fantastic to do that. And she has always supported the effort and time to go to Sydney in the last year, a lot, almost 3 days a week for about every 3 weeks for the last 18 months. So that's a huge time away from the family, and never once has she, complained about the time I've had to invest in that. So fantastic.
Brilliant. And look, the next section is around live, and just sort of take us through your typical week, if there is such a thing for you, but if there is, what's a typical week look like?
A typical week starts for me with exercise in the morning, every morning. That, and I like to mix it up. So that would be either a swim, a bike ride to work, a gym session, probably any one of those three, maybe an early morning game of tennis. So this morning was a gym session. Yesterday was a bike ride. Tomorrow morning at 6:15 I'll be playing tennis. So every morning it starts with a workout of some kind, and different every day. Gets you started well, a good breakfast and so forth. The day can be very different depending on if I'm Sydney or Melbourne or Canberra or where I am, but I'm in Melbourne more often than not. So I probably work from about typically 8 till 6 is a typical length of a day. But the work that I do is so varied. I love every single day. So the day would be, a coaching session, at least one. I've had 2 of those today for an hour and a half, 2 hours with individuals. It might be running a workshop probably once a week or once every 2 weeks. I'll run a whole day's workshop with an executive team. It could be a business development meeting. It could be a presentation to win new work. It could be a podcast. Internally, I do a lot of mentoring and coaching of my own team. I have to create a learning organisation. So I try to get the balance right between how much work I'm doing, how much business development I'm doing, and how much of internal capability development I'm doing, because I have to share the knowledge that I've got inside my head and build the capability. If I can't build the capability of my team, then we won't have a future, and I can't let go to work on the business until I know that I've transferred the knowledge to the right people. So a typical week is that I would typically get home and around 7 o'clock is fairly typical. And then I've got 3 young children that would be having dinner with the family over the dinner table, talking to all of them and trying to spend some time with each of them, including a walk in the evening with my wife before closing down and winding down for the evening. That's a fairly typical week.
Excellent. And would that have looked much different if you had stayed at Spotless?
Yeah, certainly. Probably the morning exercise has been something I've always done. The time with family, I think, would probably be similar. It would be the enjoyment of every day, the fact that I look forward to coming to the day, the variety, the fact that I'm in control of it. And if we're successful, it's large part due to my input, whereas at Spotless, I think that with a very large corporate, your achievements sometimes do not match your input. Whereas when you're running your own business, you're largely in control of your own destiny.
Yeah, excellent. And it certainly rewards those high achievers, which I know you're one of. So the next section is the give section. And I know you briefly touched on it before, but what's a cause that you've got a passion for or you're committed to?
Really, the whole area of mental illness and working with people with mental illness. I did touch on it. So unfortunately, I have 2 brothers with mental illness. One's got schizophrenia, and the other brother has anxiety and depression. One brother's older and one's younger, and they both developed illness at a young age. 17 to 19 age bracket. That formed a big part of my decision making to become a psychologist, as well as my own sports psychology experience. And I was always the helper in the family, if you like. So it's sort of being a psychologist is sort of a big part of my life, and because of my role in the family. So I guess my cause is I spend a lot of time just trying to help my 2 brothers and their friends and people around them to deal with mental illness and to have an okay life. So I guess it's not such a giving to a charity; it's more my time in helping my brothers with deal with mental illness.
Yeah, look, and I'm sure that for a lot of us that do give to a charity, it's only for a brief period in our life often, or it's only a small window, whereas for you, I'm sure it's, heavy involvement for a long, long time. So we really admire you for that. So the last section is the take action section, where the BLG listeners can get some great practical advice from you, incremental to the advice you've already given. So the first one is, what's your number one personal productivity tip? And obviously your field, you see lots and lots of people, so I'd love to get your answer on this.
I think if I were to say number one, it is the balance between being very clear on your purpose and your vision and your sort of strategy, your Simon Sinek why, but also where you're going and those sort of things. But marrying that up with daily behaviours, it's your daily, what are you doing today, tomorrow, the next day? What are you doing every day that aligns to where you're going? And to me, that's the most important thing, the alignment of daily behaviours with your purpose and direction.
Excellent. Fantastic. And apps, I don't think any of us can be without our phones for a day. What are some of the key apps that you use on your mobile phone on a regular basis?
It's interesting. I didn't think I have many, but there are actually quite a few. Not really in order, but possibly in order. Certainly use LinkedIn every day as an app. Because I'm fit, I've got a Fitbit, so I use a Fitbit app. I use Bloomberg to look at investments. I use WhatsApp to connect with my tennis sort of group. I use, not very often, but certainly I'm almost ashamed to say, but I do use Facebook and Instagram, probably more Instagram than Facebook. I love St Kilda Footy Club, so I've got the St Kilda Footy Club app. Uber, and even a nice little one for those who are interested in breathing relaxation exercises called Smiling Mind is quite a good one. So they're sort of the main ones that I use.
Brilliant, great. And there'll be links in the show notes to all of those. And the next question is around a book. What's a favourite book you'd love to recommend to the BLG audience?
I've got a book on the go all the time. I think it's important to read for 30 minutes every day, and I'm trying to become more and more selective about the books that I read because there's so many great books out there, but I don't want to read rubbish. So probably the most recent one that I've read, and in fact read twice and written notes on that I really like, is called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. Just a fantastic book that aligns to my philosophies around well-being and around the way you live your life. But it's told through a story, through a fable, and so it's easy to read. You can read it in less than a week because it's using storytelling to send some major messages about life. So The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari.
Excellent. I'll have to get that. I must admit I haven't heard of that, but I've been a big Ferrari fan and loving Buddhism. I'd love to pick up on that. So the last question is around advice. So you've had 8 wonderful years, but also some brilliant experiences through from your sport right through your corporate career. What's a piece of advice you would give someone that's just about to leave corporate today and starting their journey on building their own business? What's one piece of advice you'd think they would find valuable?
Probably the flexibility, adaptability side of things. When you begin a business, you need to be clear on why you're starting and those things that I talked about before. So those things are important, but you also need to make sure when you're first starting out that actually you're very pragmatic and practical, and in terms of you need some income, you need some cash coming in, and you need to build on small things. So it's the small things that you have to do every day to get you confidence, and then doing that repeatedly gives you long-term success. So it gives you large successes through small daily wins. So to me, that's the thing to think. You might be thinking big picture long-term, but actually you need to start with what can I do today to bring some income in, to make sure I've got the cash flow and the confidence to then go to the next step, and then it's just cumulative from there. So start small and think about your daily wins to build long-term, large-scale success.
Excellent, great advice. And how can people find out more about you?
Yeah, I'd love to talk to anyone who's interested in chatting, and really just go on to the PeopleScape website. So just www.peoplescape.com.au, and you can find out and get my contact details and find out more about us, and love to talk to anyone who's interested in chatting.
Brilliant. So thanks, Hayden, for sharing your journey with the BLG listeners today. I'm sure they got lots of value, as I have, and I really value your friendship and also the contribution you make to the BLG community. So we wish you every success, and thanks for being on the show today.
No worries. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you for listening to the Build, Live, Give show. If you found this show helpful, please share it with others so we can build businesses, live great lives, and give back to the community. If you would like to join the BLG community, go to our website, www.buildlivegive.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.